In 2018, Andrew Davie survived a ruptured brain aneurysm and hemorrhage. Now, today, he has recently graduated with a clinical mental health counseling degree, practices as an LGPC, consults for James Mason University about brain injury assessments, and before her passing, he cared for his mother while she had ALS. What a huge undertaking. He learned how to turn a terrible situation into something good with the knowledge to help others. You are going to enjoy Andrew's story today.
Have you ever felt like giving up, quitting, throwing in the towel? Welcome to Never Ever Give Up Hope featuring Carol Graham. She's an author, health coach, and motivational speaker. Backed into a corner multiple times in her life, Carol shares with you stories on how she overcame some of the toughest obstacles a person can go through in life, but refused to give up hope. Rather than admit defeat, an opportunity was presented, and it involves each and every one of you. Carol will feature spectacular guests who will share their messages of hope, encouragement, and their inspiration to prove why life's adversities only make you stronger. And now, welcoming the host of the show, here's Carol Graham.
Andrew Davie has worked in theater, finance, and education. He taught English and creative writing at the middle, high school, and college levels for students with learning disability difficulties and ADHD. He has taught English as a second language in the United States and also abroad in Hong Kong. He has written short stories, novellas, co-hosts a music review show, and he volunteers. He is a busy man, and I thank you, Andrew, for taking the time to share your story today on Never Ever Give Up Hope.
Well, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, so let's start a little bit. So tell us a little bit about the story that I shared.
Okay, well, so to give you some context, at the time I was living in Alexandria, Virginia. I had just finished the school year teaching high school at the time.
Okay.
And I had not, I had I had just had my first fiction book accepted for publication that was supposed to come out in 2019. So I had imagined that I would apply to PhD programs for creative writing as a way to kind of step back from teaching for a little bit and further embrace my potential writing career that I assumed was on the precipice of becoming something monumental.
Mm.
So I turned 40 years old on June 23rd. And then on June 29th, I was going to go to visit my parents and my brother, sister-in-law, and nephew, who were vacationing with my parents at the time. And they used to live about an hour south of Charleston, South Carolina. So the morning of June 29th, I got to the airport and I felt fine. And then when I got to my gate, I started to sweat uncontrollably.
Oh my.
Just really and not simple like, it's 10 degrees warmer and I'm beginning to perspire, but just real exertion. And this is also before COVID. So I assumed maybe I'm coming down with the flu or there's something, but it's not a serious red flag. My thought was, I just need to get on the plane. I'll take a nap. I'm sure I'll feel fine when I land.
Okay.
So then they called my group to board and I had a backpack with me. So I lifted my backpack up and it felt like it had cinder blocks in there.
Oh my goodness.
Which again, that's probably two serious red flags. But at the time, I wasn't really thinking clearly anymore. Um, and as I went to scan my ticket, the floor started to shift, like I was in a fun house at a carnival. Um, and
Huh.
I still wasn't thinking clearly at this point. I remember imagining it was going to be difficult to board the plane with a moving floor, not that the floor shouldn't be moving. Um,
Oh my goodness.
and I guess I scanned my ticket and took a step forward and fell on the jetway. So
Oh,
this turned out to be really fortunate because I had had a ruptured brain aneurysm, which would have been lethal um, in any other circumstance had I not been out in public with um, with people witnessing this. So first responders could get to me very quickly, and I just remember hearing someone telling me not to move.
huh.
So I didn't. I thought, okay, they know what they're talking about. Um, and then I was fitted with a neck brace and moved out of the way. And the last thing I remember saying was, I can't miss my flight because all I could think about was how nervous my mother would be if I missed my flight. So the person
Oh,
laughed and said, don't worry, we can get you on another flight. And then I passed out and I have no memory of the next 3 weeks.
oh my word. Are you serious?
Yeah. So I fortunately, what I was told later was I was taken to the hospital. I ended up at George Washington University Hospital, which I later found out was one of the best trauma centers in the United States. So again, things really broke my way in terms of being lucky. Um, while I was in surgery, my neurosurgeon's physician's assistant found my phone and saw a bunch of missed calls. So he recognized my brother's name on my phone, having the same last name. So he called from my phone. My family at the time thought, I think I had filled out the emergency contact information for JetBlue, the airline I took.
Right.
So they called my mother just to say that I missed my flight. Um, I think all the news that they'd been given was that I fell and missed my flight. Um, I don't think anyone knew the severity of what had happened.
Right. Right.
So for about 10 hours, I think my family assumed that I was a klutz and that I had just tripped. Um, and then when the doctor called, they explained what had happened. So the vacation was canceled. I think my parents flew up. My brother drove, but everyone came up to DC. Um, and I think as a result of the procedure, they had to monitor me for something called vasospasms, which I think is like a stroke that you can have
Okay.
as a result, like an after an aneurysm stroke. So for about 3 weeks, I was in intensive care being monitored. Um, and I have no memory of that, but I've seen cell phone videos of me talking to people and answering questions and feeding myself for the first time, um, which was very surreal. Also, very funny in hindsight because I was told that my parents needed to access my laptop and they kept asking me for my password and I wouldn't give it to them because you're supposed to protect that information. Um, So apparently, I told everyone that I had lived and taught in Australia, which was not true, but I was adamant about that. I wasn't out of the woods yet. I was restrained, but I managed to free myself from my restraints and I tried to go to the bathroom and I ended up falling again and breaking my nose. Um,
Oh my word. Now, do you have memory of all this happen, like what you were sharing with your family, etc.? Do you
no,
recall?
the only thing I remembered someone telling me or hearing the phrase "let it fly." And I asked them about that when I regained cognizance in rehabilitation. And they told me that it was to remind me that I didn't need to get out of bed to go to the bathroom. Since I had a catheter, I could just go and basically
Right,
let it
right.
fly. Um, but that's the only thing that I still remember or remembered at all from those 3 weeks.
Wow.
So,
Okay, I interrupted you, so continue with your
no,
story
no,
then.
it's so
Broke your nose.
I broke my nose. I had had I think my family was told that the prognosis looked good provided I didn't have a second bleed, which I did end up having a second bleed. So it seemed like every time I was out of the woods, I would find a way to sneak back into the woods again. Um, I think I developed pneumonia at one point. Um, But fortunately, everything played out well enough to the point where I made it through the 3 week window. Um, and I regained cognizance and I was moved to rehab. And then I sort of began the rehab process, which I think was about a week and a half, um, where I still couldn't comprehend what had happened. I think I was still sort of on autopilot with just recovering physically, that it was very difficult to understand the magnitude of what had happened. There wasn't a lot of downtime. I would have a physical therapist come to my room and do exercises with me, and then occupational therapy, speech therapy, and then you'd go to lunch. So there really wasn't a lot of time to think about the existential questions.
One thing I want to share with is that you did an excellent description of what happened because people that are listening need to understand some of these some like you didn't know what was happening, and if this is happening to somebody else, they would be in that same position. So I appreciate your description. That was wonderful, and to bring understanding to us. Did fear enter in at any point, like when you were cognizant or not?
Not yet. What I discovered later on was that the physical elements of the recovery would take precedence, and I would basically be focused on that before I began thinking about emotions. Um,
Okay.
so, really, those 10 days and then the next few weeks afterward, when I was in outpatient, I was discharged and I moved back home. And my mother actually stayed with me for a few weeks and would take me to outpatient. I did speech therapy and physical therapy, um, occupational therapy, which is sort of like learning how to do different tasks again and being
Right.
self sufficient. That was a little too advanced for me at that point. I would basically just try to walk down the hallway outside of my apartment a few times a day, um, begin to build up my stamina and endurance again. The speech language was interesting because my ability to make abstract inferences was gone.
Oh,
Um,
really?
yeah, it was very strange. I was doing a lot of worksheets where you would have to infer information. They would give you maybe 75% of the answer, and then you'd have to infer the final 25%. And for some reason, that was very difficult. But at the time, I don't remember really fixating on or having the ability to really, it was more just like, okay, we're going to go walk the hallway right now. And then I was just sort of focused on that. And then at night, my mother had brought her iPad with her, which was still connected to South Carolina television. So every night we would watch Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy, and then we, we would watch commercials from South Carolina. And that became sort of symbolic of the recovery, but also of some enjoyable moments we were having while things were still sort of up in the air.
So
Um,
did you find that those exercises stimulated you?
yeah, absolutely. Um, in the beginning, it was also a great way to mark my progress because when I was released, I needed to walk with a cane while somebody held a guard belt, which is basically just like a belt that goes around your midsection so someone can hold on to it in case you begin to stumble.
Okay.
And I also had double vision, so I wore an eye patch. Um, but eventually that healed. I didn't need the cane anymore. Most of the physical things in terms of the recovery began to taper off after about the first 9 months. Um, I began to build my endurance back up. I felt more comfortable. Even to this day now, 7 years later, my balance isn't 100%. And if I move my head side to side, I have to wait for my vision to settle. It's
Mm,
sort of like the experience you get when you step off a merry-go-round. Fortunately, I don't get nauseous. At the back then, it was a little jarring. Now I've sort of gotten used to the fact that that's
right.
just how it is. But sometime around September, I think I got back. I got back just before Labor Day, and I think maybe 2 weeks later in September, my mom and I drove to be at my parents' house with my father because it was a lot easier for me to just recover there. And that's kind of when the physical recovery began to taper off and the emotional recovery sort of began in earnest. And that's when a lot of the questions about, okay, well, now what am I going to do with my life? What
Right.
should I go back to teaching? Am I able to go back to teaching? Can I still write anymore? My book is coming out. What's that going to be like? That's really when those sorts of questions began making themselves apparent.
So during that experience in itself, what did you learn?
I learned how to be much more comfortable with not being in control. Um,
Mm,
as much as I wanted the recovery process to meet my expectations, I mean, most people that experience what I have don't survive, or if they do, they have really serious neurological deficiencies. Um, so there wasn't a lot of information for me to read or learn about that could let me know that I was having a typical reaction to something or I was having a good reaction to. So I really had to search. I would talk to people on message boards. At various recovery support groups. And these were people who just had brain injuries, but they could confirm that what I was feeling wasn't unique to me. And that really helped. So a lot of it was just kind of learning how to be comfortable with the recovery taking the time it needed. And I think also I had assumed that my life would take a certain path. Um,
mhm.
I was a teacher to support my writing career. Um, but I also assumed that one day I would start a family, I would get married, I would have children. And as a result of the aneurysm, my ability to make emotional connections was changed. Um,
Really?
so I suddenly had to take a step back and reflect on all of these things that I thought would give my life value, suddenly either didn't seem as important anymore or weren't attainable or had just changed. So being able to reconcile that was probably the biggest struggle that I had.
And have you been able to come to that place?
It took about 3 years. I had been taking Prozac previously for obsessive compulsive disorder and then got back on it at a lower dose because I think the result of the emotional effects of the aneurysm was causing me to feel depressed. So
Mm,
that really helped with my emotional regulation. Um, and then by year 3, I sort of began to feel comfortable with the fact that my life will probably look different than I had imagined it would, but that there were still fulfilling elements to it that maybe I just didn't know about yet. And maybe I wouldn't find them out immediately, but that they were out there. And having that perspective, that was the biggest challenge. I began working with a somatic experience therapist to help me process emotions now in a new way. And as a result of the work she and I did, it really helped me feel more comfortable with uncertainty. And, I've been fortunate that having that approach has allowed me to discover some things that really resonate with me that I maybe wouldn't have figured out before. Um, like when my book came out, I had assumed, okay, this is the start of an illustrious writing career that will give me a lot of attention and money and accolades, and I'll, Hollywood will start calling and they'll want to
Right,
adapt my
right,
book into a film, and I'll be a guest on, Conan O'Brien's show, and just a lot of these sort of really wonderful, relatively naive fantasies that I think everyone has at a certain point in their
right,
life.
right.
But it just so happened to culminate at this point where I really needed it to be the foundation on which I could build something after having this tragedy. But at this point now, I'm much more comfortable and enjoy just the process of writing, rather than publishing needing to serve a larger part of my life. So that took about 3 years to begin to feel comfortable. I tried to go back into the online dating world after after the aneurysm, which provided a whole new set of interesting dilemmas. Like I realized it was a lot like what it could have been on the episode of Seinfeld or Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Okay.
Um, like I had a question with my father where he said, maybe you don't bring up the fact that you had an aneurysm, um,
Okay. Right.
uh, especially on the first date. Like how do you say something like, would you like to split an order of nachos? By the way, do you know what a subarachnoid hemorrhage is? So there were a lot of interesting developments too, where I realized that um,
Less
I,
is more.
well, yes, but also I had assumed. So I have a very close friend of mine who I've met in the last since the pandemic, basically, and we talk very frequently. And she's been able to provide a lot of support that I assumed was basically reserved for a spouse
Mm,
or something. I think growing up, I had assumed the type of friendship and support and love that you get from somebody can only be really valuable if you're in a serious romantic relationship with them. And I think that was debunked by my experience with the aneurysm and COVID and just living life
mhm.
from this new perspective. Um, so there have been some wonderful new developments that I wouldn't have expected had the aneurysm not happened. Um,
Right.
that's not to say that I would suggest everyone have an aneurysm to reconfigure their life, but for me, it was a moment where I could take a step back. Um, I really look at my life now like I've been given a second chance. Um, so how do I make the best of each situation? I think
Right.
there was a lot of reflection where I thought, am I looking at this goal because I expect that that's what most people in my position would want, or do I really want to achieve this for my own fulfillment? Um, a lot of the conditioning I think that we have growing up that suggests that success looks like the following picture, and then
Right.
you spend a lot of time trying to replicate that picture in your personal life. Somewhere around, I would say, around the pandemic, I moved back in with my parent. I did get a job that was going to start in April of 2020, where I would be working at a tutoring center, uh, because I hadn't thought about leaving education yet, and I realized that teaching in the classroom would probably be a little too overwhelming. And then COVID happened and the job was canceled. So I ended up moving back in with my parents for about 13 months. And that's when I really began to feel comfortable emotionally. Um,
Really.
And I also discovered that I probably should change careers. Um,
Hmm.
so I decided to become a mental health counselor. My thought was I could work with people recovering from brain injuries and help them navigate their emotional recovery the way that I learned how to do it on my own. So I went back to school, graduated last year with a degree in clinical mental health counseling, um,
Wow.
and I was able to get a job working where I had had my internship, um, which is a private practice in Maryland. So I counsel clients in Maryland virtually. Um, so I'm an LGPC, which stands for Licensed Graduate Professional Counselor, um, which basically means that I'm a counselor who's under supervision. So I meet with my supervisor weekly. And then after I accumulate a certain amount of hours, I'll be able to be independently licensed.
Oh my goodness. Awesome.
Um, but again, that all worked. So while I was in school and I was doing my internship, my mother was diagnosed with ALS. Um, and sometime around June of 2023, uh, she began to require 24-hour care.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
and at the time, my mother would have an aide that would come in the morning, and then she would leave in the afternoon, and my father would basically take care of her by himself. Um, so I went to visit them for July 4th weekend, and my father told me that it was becoming too difficult for him to care for her by himself. Since most of my classes had ended, and I was doing my internship virtually, I basically could move back in with them and become her full-time caregiver while still finishing up my degree, all of those things. Um, and that's really where things got interesting because the emotional bluntness that I'd had that wouldn't allow me to fully realize the sensations of joy or sadness that I used to
Hmm.
became a silver lining because I could take care of my mother in a very sad situation that was very emotionally taxing,
Wow.
but it wouldn't affect me. So that was wonderful because I could give her a quality of life that she wouldn't have been able to have if I hadn't have been there. Um,
Right.
and it was really great because for me, every day was now filled from the moment I woke up to the moment I went to sleep. I had things to do all the time, um,
Hmm.
which also helped me kind of manage my own recovery,
Of course. Of course.
which was no longer overwhelming, but still was great to have something to do all the time. That's sort of where I began to kind of find my rhythm in terms of being her caregiver, spending a lot of time with my parents, which was wonderful. I don't think many people in their mid 40s get to spend as much time with their
Right.
parents.
Right.
Um, and it also sort of helped me reconfigure my priorities in terms of what was important. Um, so I still write, which is wonderful, but it's not, um, I don't focus on publishing being the end result that's needed in order for me to find fulfillment. And I'm able to counsel people. I'm able to go visit a lot of people as a result of the fact that my counseling is virtual. Um, so it's ended up being an opportunity for me to really make the most of the fact that I've been given a second opportunity.
And that's exactly what I said in the intro. And you fulfilled that. What I said was how you learned to turn a terrible situation into something good with a new knowledge and how to help others. So this has been awesome. I know that I'm taking lots of notes, and I believe that you're really resonating with a lot of people who are listening from many different perspectives. And the self-reflection that you I just wrote that as you were talking, that we all need, to take a moment to stop. I mean, in your case, you have to stop but for all of us to self reflect in what we are accomplishing that is important, what really matters, and all those things that many of us have to learn. And sometimes it's almost too late in life, but you seem to have just, it's been a flow for you. I mean, I don't know how to explain it. I don't have the words that I'm feeling, but I really appreciate what you said, not just from an emotional level, but also just in general. And my hat's off to you. You have tenacity that's very evident, a stick to itiveness. Your focus is not just on yourself, it is on others. And so that is sincerely appreciated. And I thank you for that.
Carol Graham would like to show you the path from misery to miraculous triumph in her fast-paced memoir, Battered Hope. She relates her determination to succeed as someone who experienced one horrendous nightmare after another. Gang raped and left for dead, loss of a child, husband falsely imprisoned, and cancer. Nothing could break her tenacity or faith. No matter what you face, heartache, loss, suffering, or injustice, Carol will illustrate how she became a victor the same way you can. The secret is to never, ever give up hope. Order your copy at Amazon or batteredhope.blogspot.com.
All right, so coming back in. So tell us about the Beyond series and anything else that you have written that you would like to share with the audience.
Went back to graduate school for creative writing with the thought that I would write novels. But when I got there, I discovered it was a lot easier to write short stories. Instead of giving someone, your classmates, 20 pages of a 400-page book, and having them have to remember what happened in the previous 20 pages, you could give them a complete work. So I gravitated towards being a short story writer. And then I read a book called You Were Never Really Here, which was a crime fiction novella that's maybe only 110 pages, that was written by a writer who usually wrote comedic essays about his personal life. And I remember thinking, I should try my hand at crime fiction. I've always wanted to do that. And this seems like a great way to do that. So I wrote a book called Pavement, which I'm bringing it up because it was the first one. It was the one that got accepted first. It came out in 2019. And that sort of allowed me to continue working, writing these short novels with various crime fiction driven plots. The Beyond series happened. So when I was living in Asia, I had a classmate who wrote a romance novel that was published, and I thought maybe I would try my hand at romance. So I ended up writing what I had thought would be a romantic sort of swashbuckling story. About, I remember there was a book that came out followed by a movie called Taipan, which took place in Hong Kong during what were referred to as the Opium Wars, where there were, I believe, English and Scottish merchants that were trying to set up in Hong Kong, and there was a lot of really wonderful historical intrigue going on. So I had written this story that focused on a group of basically English pirates that were running opium on behalf of these Hong Kong criminals.
Right.
And then I put the story away for a while, found it again, and thought perhaps I could just add another layer to it just to see where it went. So I ended up writing about a similar timeline with some Civil War veterans. And I was just sort of excited to jump on Wikipedia and see what interesting things I could find about, post-Civil War soldiers and what they might have been up to. And then somehow I think I just decided to include the Rise of the Living Dead. I don't know where that, I kind of shoehorned that in. So the pirates and the Civil War veterans end up crossing paths at a place where the dead have returned. And they have to team together to sort of escape from. And then I just remember thinking this would be a lot of fun to revisit this story, which I think I've done. I think there are now 4 installments in the Beyond series that are it's sort of historically based. I think my uncle really loves reading about it. So I think part of the reason I keep going back to it is because he's such a big fan and I enjoy, coming up with these stories for him.
And are they published?
They are, yeah. I found a really wonderful small publisher named Next Chapter Books, and they are very welcoming when I send them new stuff. So they've put forth all 4 installments. And I think actually the first 3 you can get in 1 volume on Amazon. I think if you were very interested in the first, in the series at all, that they're all
right.
Available there.
All right. Well, that sounds really interesting. I think that's appealing to a large audience.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I've really just enjoyed the opportunity to sort of, I'm so far removed from that at all in terms of my everyday life that it's just fun to kind of recreate in that space and think about, pirates and the undead.
Right. Okay. All right. Is there any other encouragement or anything else that you would like to share with the audience after sharing your story today?
I would say for anyone who's embarking on any kind of recovery to remember that it's not going to be linear, that every recovery moves in a spiral. So there will be days where you feel like you've made a lot of progress and then days where you feel like you've lost all your progress. That image helped me a lot to remind myself that it may feel, you usually move an inch a day, for example. So it's very difficult to remember that you're making progress because it doesn't feel like it. I also used to keep a Post-it note above my desk that read, "Rome wasn't built in a day." Just as a way to remind myself, as much as I would like to control how things were happening and feel like I was really making a lot more progress, it was going to happen in its own time. So
that is excellent.
Be kind to yourself with all of this. That would be my advice.
Yes, that is excellent. I thank you. Well, thank you so much, Andrew, for being on Never Ever Give Up Hope today. As I said earlier, I've appreciated what you shared, both with the technical side of things, the emotion, your tenacity, and how no matter what happens, we should not give up hope, but move forward. And everything that you shared, it was intriguing and definitely inspiring. And I thank you. Thank you so much, Andrew.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to Never Ever Give Up Hope, featuring Carol Graham. Did you know that most people succeed because they are determined to? Quitting was never an option. Carol loves your comments and will respond to each one. So please subscribe and review this podcast. A rating of 5 stars would be outstanding and appreciated. Remember, if you are still here, there is always hope.